Hello, and welcome to my personal project product, a video summary / documentary of my journey immersing myself in Russian culture. My name is Vasco McAlear. As per usual with a personal project, my project is based on 3 criterion or specifications. Let's start with that then, to lay the ground rules to better understand my product and overall outcome, as well as what I've learned in the end. My 3 specifications cover 3 of the major elements of a people's culture, which is music, cuisine, and language. Specification 1 covers music. The only requirement for music is that the song or songs are either folk songs or of the modern era, which I decided was to be from 1970 onwards, and for it to have lyrics. For my lowest grade, I was to be able to perform 1 song at a basic level, and for my highest grade, I was to be able to perform 2 songs at an advanced level, as well as having researched their lyrics and meaning. The music aspect of this project was where I underperformed the most. In the end, I was only able to perform and record 1 song, which is the song you hear in the background now, by Vladimir Vysotsky, also known as Here, Paws of Fir Trees Are Shivering. Vysotsky was known to be a very famous artist in the Soviet era of Russia, and often discreetly criticizing the regime in his lyrics, as he often made songs about people in the gulags and those wishing for a better life, with his lyrics and implying an enduring mentality to tell the Russian people to stay strong. In this song specifically, many oxymorons and contradictions are used to indicate that life was not what it was supposed to be, as after lines and lines of describing beauty and nature, the only repeated line in the whole song says that he will still get you out, away from this place. In the second half of the song, he depicts a more depressing and grim environment, with an overcast sky and no morning dew. In that following chorus, he sings about how he will steal you away if theft suits your heart, but questions if his efforts are futile. In the end, though I was only to perform 1 song, which means that my grade will not get any higher than 4 out of 8, this was because I was not expecting how difficult learning a song in a foreign language was, and it took a lot of time. More on that at the end. My second specification covers cuisine and food. For my lowest grade, I was to prepare and eat at least 1 traditional Ural dish, preferably the main course. For my highest grade, I was to prepare 2 traditional Ural dishes, 1 main course dish and 1 dessert, whilst having to research where they come from and how they came to be. In the end, for food, I was much more successful than in music. I went to a Russian/Slavic food store nearby with my supervisor, where I bought pelmeni and sushki, both popular foods in the Ural region. Also, the reason I was doing food from the Ural region was that my supervisor was from Yekaterinburg, and since there are so many cultures from different regions in Russia, I had to choose one specifically. The pelmeni was simple to make, as I had to boil the dumplings and prepare them with a salad. They were filled with beef on the inside and were very filling, and you can often eat them with sour cream or butter. Definitely one of my favorite foods by far. And the sushki made a perfect small dessert, as their lightly sweet and slightly salty flavor was perfect with the coffee. Pelmeni was often described as the heart of Russian food, and the earliest traces of the food go back to the Ural region, where the food was popularized. However, it is theorized that it truly originated from baomian in China, and adaptations were made to the recipe as it spread from the Mongols to Siberia and later Ural. It was also very popular all over Russia due to it being able to store meat for much longer in colder climates, as it was confined in a dumpling. Sushki, deriving from the verb sushit, meant to dry. It was often sold and hung on streets in street markets, and, as the name suggests, was a dry biscuit. It was a popular biscuit in Russia due to it being cheap and simple to bake, although nowadays, most sushki is pre-packaged and sold commercially. And for my final specification, I was to learn the Russian language, arguably the hardest part of this project, due to the fact that it must be worked on constantly at a regular rate. For my lowest grade, I was to be able to speak, read, and write basic words or even phrases, and for my highest grade, I was to be able to uphold a basic present tense conversation in Russian, talking about family, nationality, etc., as well as being able to read and write most of those phrases myself. The way I went about doing this was to use a reputable online site called Busu. This site taught me vocabulary and grammar in a way that was structured and easy to understand, which is very important with a complex grammar system like that of the Russian language. It also allowed me to get feedback from native speakers on my work and gave me a study plan which would outline my strengths and weaknesses over the time period. I plan to practice and learn the language 4 times a week for 20 minutes each time, which, if learning a language is your one and only goal, is not quite enough time to advance very quickly. However, this was the compromise I had to make, given that I still had classes to attend, as well as other parts of the personal project to work on, music and food, and the report. However, I was still able to pick up the language fairly quickly. My overall goal was to make it to 25 lessons overall, and memorize everything I've learned up to that point. By the first few days, I had memorized the alphabet, as well as conversation starters. Привет. Привет. Как поживаешь? Хорошо, спасибо. Как ты? Отлично. Очень приятно. For the next week, I would learn how to ask for a name, as well as formal and informal ways of saying things. Здравствуйте. Здравствуйте. Как вас зовут? У меня зовут Василий. Как вы? У меня зовут Саша. Очень приятно. At this point, I had reached around lesson 15. As for starting a language, it would always take much more time to learn the first few words and phrases. But from here, I would be learning much more and much quicker. By lesson 20, I learned how to talk about jobs and families, as well as finally learning about the iconically dreaded gender rules, as well as learning the I, you, he, she, we, you plural, and they pronouns. Кто ты по профессии? Я журналист. Как ты? Кто ты по профессии? Я учитель. Какова его профессия? Он студент. From 20 until the end of my experience with the language, ending at level 25, I would learn how to talk about where you're from, as well as possessives, as in to have or not to have, as well as numbers and quantitatives. Откуда вы? Я американец. Как вы? Откуда вы? Я русский. Сколько яблок? Есть 4 яблока. At this point, I had reached my goal of 25 lessons, and began to focus on simply memorizing the vocab and grammar, and beginning to work on this video. Overall, I believe I was able to achieve at least a 6 on this part of the project, as I felt very confident using the phrases I had learned, and was able to read and write almost all of them. However, I wasn't as fluent as I had hoped when I would talk in Russian to my supervisor, meaning that solidifying myself at least a 7th grade would be a stretch. Anyways, now that I've talked about my 3 specifications and how I did in all of them, it's time I reflected on how I did and how I could have done better. A common theme in most of my work was that I put too many expectations on myself. In terms of the music, making a roadblock in my specification, where I would have to learn 2 songs in Russian just to make it past the 4 mark, was a big mistake, as I had not anticipated how incredibly difficult it is to learn a song in a language completely new and alien to you, especially so early in the learning process of the language. Just learning the Vysotsky song took me weeks on the side of also learning the language, as well as high school. This was also seen in the language aspect, as I didn't realize how difficult picking up a new language from scratch was, especially when you have to self-teach it. I think that expecting myself to be able to have even a basic present tense conversation in Russian was too much of a stretch to achieve with such little time, compared to what would be most productive for learning the language, and all the side projects too. The food, however, was much easier, as it is a much more quantitative and easy to grasp concept that can also be made in a day. Another big issue I faced throughout the project was motivation. I love languages and I love learning them, but I have never done so in an environment such as this. The IB aims to make the personal project about your growth as a person and your interests, but the looming frustration of pages of robotic planning and research that I felt was irrelevant crushed much of my motivation for even my favorite pastime. It got to the point where I dreaded most of the work I had to do in this project, as my motivation moved from wanting to succeed and learn about a culture to the fear of failure. I believe that this was especially magnified because of the nature of my project, as learning something new requires your attention constantly and can't just be worked on for a few hours for a few days to finish. Learning the language and songs every other day made it so I had less time to focus on writing my report draft and other necessities for this project. But luckily, my supervisor was always very supportive and made sure that I stayed on track, as I barely finished my work on time. So yeah, that about covers it. I hope this video was very useful to learn about the personal project, and I wish any new 10th grade students the best. You'll need it. I definitely recommend checking out Busuu if you're looking for a great website to learn a language that is far more structured and easier to understand than Duolingo. I feel very proud about how far I've come with Russian, but I think it would have been a lot easier if I just built a chair. Thanks.